Hey, have you ever stopped to think about your computer? I mean, really think about it. Not just as a machine, but as this incredibly complex, perfectly synchronized orchestra. Every single click, every key you press, every program you launch, it's like a musician playing their part. But who in the world is leading this whole performance?
So let me ask you this. What's the single most important program on your computer? Is it your web browser? Maybe your favorite game? Well, it's kind of a trick question, because the real answer is something that runs so seamlessly, so perfectly, you probably don't even notice it's there.
All right, so here's our program for today's performance. First, we'll meet the conductor. Then, we'll see how it manages all the performers and literally sets the stage. After that, we'll dive into how it orchestrates all the gear, and finally, how it keeps the whole show from hitting a really, really bad note.
So who is this mysterious conductor anyway? Well, it's the operating system. You know it as the OS, and it is the absolute master program that makes everything else you do possible.
Now, the formal textbook definition tells us it's the system software that manages all the computer hardware and software resources. But honestly, I like our analogy way better. The OS is the conductor. It doesn't play an instrument itself, but without it, you just have a room full of incredibly talented musicians making a bunch of chaotic noise. The OS is what brings order, harmony, and music to the whole thing.
And here's the thing, you're already super familiar with these conductors, even if you don't think about it. Whether you're on a PC running Windows, a Mac with Mac OS, maybe a server powered by Linux, or even just scrolling on your phone with Android, you are interacting with an operating system every single day. It's the face of your own personal digital orchestra.
Okay, so if the OS is our conductor, then who are the musicians? Well, every single application you run, your browser, your music player, your word processor, each one is a performer in the orchestra. And in computer terms, we call them processes.
A process is really just a program that's currently up and running, and the OS has the huge job of deciding when each musician gets to play, how loud, and for how long. It does this through something called scheduling, where it gives each process a tiny, tiny fraction of a second, a time slice, with the computer's brain, the CPU, before zipping over to the next one. It happens so fast, it creates this perfect illusion that everything is running all at once. Pretty amazing, right?
And every one of these processes goes through its own little life cycle. It starts out as new. Think of that as a musician waiting backstage. Then it's ready, instrument in hand, just waiting for the conductor's cue. Running is its big moment in the spotlight, playing its solo on the CPU. Sometimes it has to go into a waiting state, maybe for another musician to finish up. And finally, it's terminated. The performance is over, and it takes a final bow.
Of course, no performance can happen without a stage. And for our digital orchestra, that stage is the computer's memory. And you guessed it, the OS is the ultimate stage manager.
The OS basically manages two main types of memory. Think of RAM, or primary memory, as the actual chairs for the musicians on stage. It's incredibly fast to access, but there's limited space, and it's temporary. When the power goes out, the chairs are cleared. Then you have the hard disk, or secondary memory. That's like the giant instrument locker backstage. It's slower to get to, but it's where everything is stored permanently. And the OS is constantly, tirelessly moving performers and their gear between the stage and that locker room to keep the whole show running without a hitch.
All right, so the conductor is managing the performers and the stage. But what about all the instruments themselves? And the sheet music? I mean, you can't have a concert without those. That's where device and file management comes in. Your keyboard, your mouse, your printer, your monitor, these are all instruments in this orchestra. And the OS acts like the quartermaster. It allocates these devices to the processes that need them, it schedules their use so you don't have two musicians trying to play the same trumpet at once, and it uses these things called device drivers to make sure every performer knows exactly how to play their assigned instrument.
And the sheet music? Well, those are all of your files. And the OS here is the master librarian. It neatly organizes everything into folders or directories so any musician can find the right piece of music in an instant. It handles creating new scores, getting rid of old ones, and letting performers read and write notes whenever they need to. Without this incredible system, it would just be utter chaos.
But what happens when things go wrong? Because, even the best orchestras can hit a bad note. The OS has to be ready to handle these tricky situations, like something called a deadlock, and of course, security threats.
Let's start with deadlock. I want you to imagine this. The lead violinist is waiting for the pianist to finish a passage before they can play. But The pianist is also waiting for the violinist to start, so nothing happens. The entire orchestra grinds to a complete halt. That's a deadlock, and it's the OS's job to either prevent this from ever happening or to jump in and fix it when it does. Now, for this kind of catastrophic silence to happen, 4 very specific conditions have to be met all at once. It's like a recipe for disaster. First, a musician needs exclusive control of an instrument. Second, they're holding that instrument while waiting for another one. Third, nobody can just take that instrument away from them. And finally, you get a circular chain of waiting. It's a perfect storm that the OS works tirelessly to prevent.
And finally, security. The OS is also the head of security for the entire concert hall. Think of it as the bouncer at the door, using passwords to check everyone's ID. It's the usher, using access controls to make sure a musician from the string section can't just wander over and start banging on the drums. It protects the whole performance from being disrupted by some rogue program or an unruly audience member.
Which brings us to a final thought. You know, a truly great conductor doesn't draw attention to themselves. They just make the orchestra shine. The music flows so perfectly that you almost forget they're even there. So here's my question for you. Is the very best operating system one that works so seamlessly, so flawlessly in the background that you never even have to think about it at all? Something to ponder the next time you boot up your machine.